Hello guys and welcome to my new video. Now I have been sick for the last week and I apologize for the lack of videos, but it is about Restoration Shaman, it is about my healers in terms of gearing, it is about double legendaries, what covenants are good with double legendaries, how should I play it, and again, this is all about Restoration Shaman. It's all about my plans in terms of double legendaries, where to craft them and how to optimize them. Feel free to agree or disagree with this. Let's go and get started with Resto Shaman. So this is my Restoration Shaman, and this is something that I run in raid situations. I've been running Necrolord, Emni, and that is something that a lot of people were running at the start when they had a single legendary. They were kind of dabbling into Ventier, and Ventier right now has taken over as the most popular option for Resto Shaman when it comes to double legendaries, and it makes sense. Ventier double legendary combo is better than what the Necro provides, but if you enjoy Necrolord, I still feel you can make Necrolord a very decent covenant in raid situations. I don't think you need to swap away if you hate Ventier, if you hate Chain Harvest, but Chain Harvest, the double Lego combo, the fact or the burst healing that you can provide is really kind of nice, and Ventier provides you with Door of Shadows, which on a lot of fights like Mythic the Sausage, maybe Mythic Zymox, and that extra mobility is almost mandatory. You can't get that extra mobility with Night Fae, and Night Fae is actually still very much viable, but the fact that Night Fae requires you to know the damage patterns of a fight. Like for example, Night Fae will lower the cooldown of your Healing Tide totem, which there are certain fights, there are actually multiple fights in the new raid where there is 2-minute burst healing requirements, and that is Artificer to some extent, the Sausage to some extent. You'll notice that Lords of Dread has 2 minutes, so some Regalian also can be put into this, but these fights have like 2 minutes, maybe a bit less, where you need a lot of burst healing, and Night Fae could actually work in them. But the fact that you need to know why you spec into Night Fae and how to optimize Night Fae with Fae Transfusion and things like that makes it a lot more difficult for majority of people, and this is why I feel Ventier is going to be really strong, on top of the fact that Ventier Soulbinds, in my opinion, are a lot stronger than Necrolord Soulbinds, with the exception of like Lead by Example, because this is actually pretty decent. But Ventier Theodar is really nice. So let's look at Theodar. So Theodar, I swapped to Ventier. This is actually a very popular build right now. The fact that you have Token of Appreciation, this provides you with a lot of passive healing. Again, you have T and things like that, and this is going to be a very popular build for raiding Resto Shaman. Ventier is becoming the #1 spot, and I can see why, because again, mobility, Doors of Shadow, all of those kind of things are always going to come into play, especially when you play a class that relatively, again, does not have a lot of displacement abilities. So if you're asking, and this is something that I get asked all the time, what covenant should I play as Resto Shaman, I honestly will tell you, just try out both of them. There is a substantial difference in terms of the gameplay when you look into Primordial Wave Necrolord or when you look at Chain Harvest Ventier, because in my opinion, Primordial Wave is a bit more difficult to play in terms of trying to optimize your Cloudburst windows, because it's all about Cloudburst windows. Can you get your Primordial Wave into Cloudburst window? Can you get Wellsprings into Cloudburst window? It's all about building your Cloudburst, and it's all about making sure the Cloudburst is gonna go off when people need healing. And with Chain Harvest, you kind of just want to make sure few things are there. Unleash Life works with Chain Harvest, which is great. Do you have your Cloudburst? Do you have your Unleash Life? And then you can kind of use your Chain Harvest, and Chain Harvest is going to be affected by Unleash Life. It's going to go into Cloudburst, and this is going to give you a lot of free healing. And the Chain Harvest cooldown is going to be reduced based on your Flame Shock crits, and there are multiple fights in the raid where there are multiple enemies. Just make sure to keep Flame Shock on those enemies. And you can see why Ventier is becoming more and more popular. So now let's go to the double legendaries and where to craft them. And my rationale behind this, again, a lot of people are going to be crafting their legendaries on slots where you get more stats and you get guaranteed gem sockets. So Helm becomes one of the most popular options because guaranteed gems, guaranteed, like the stats that you gain from it are pretty insane. But a lot of the times just filling out gaps in your gear is also a very acceptable way of trying to go about crafting a double legend. Resto Shaman is one of the healers, one of the few classes out there that they have their Primal Tide Core Legendary, which is one of your best. Again, it is an average HPS Legendary, but Resto Shaman does not have good HPS Legendaries in raid. Primal Tide Core is still a very popular legendary to craft, and you can only do it on Helm slot or Glove slot, and this is why I have a low item level glove slot on this legendary because I don't know if I'm gonna get my tier in those slots. I have a 3 set and I'm waiting to get Anduin Helm, Olihovum gloves. So depending on where I get to complete my 4 set, the other slot is going to be allocated for my legendary. So this is why I haven't crafted the max level yet. If you can, if you have 5 pieces already, you probably will craft Primal Tide Core on a helm slot because of the high stats and because of the gem. So I did craft Unity on the belt. A lot of people are going to craft Unity on the belt. Is it the most clear option? It depends. It depends on your weak spots. But because it is on my belt, I crafted Crit Verse. Again, if you're using Unity, most likely your Unity slot is going to be used for Mythic Plus and raids, and you want to assign missives that are going to be good for raids and Mythic Plus. If you're pushing high-end Mythic Plus content with your Resto Shaman, you don't want Mastery. Any healer does not want Mastery because it gives you no damage. So making sure that your Unity stats are going to be good for raid and Mythic Plus is quite important. So this is why I place Crit and Verse on it, because you can never go wrong with Crit and Verse as a Resto Shaman. Very, very solid stats. Keep in mind another thing, there are craftable gear out there in terms of your neck, in terms of rings, in terms of alchemy trinket that you can use, and they're relatively high item level. Like for example, I crafted this ring, it cost me around 30k gold on auction house, 262 item level, gives you a guaranteed socket, and it also has some special bonuses depending on the crafted person who did this. So this is my Resto Shaman in Mythic Plus gear, and again, I've made couple of mistakes in terms of crafting my double legendaries because of how I view tier set and things like that. So first of all, Kyrian. Kyrian is still the most popular option for Resto Shaman in Mythic Plus, and there's no surprise. Effusive Iron Accelerator, Mechanicos is still very, very strong. Vesper Totem has been nerfed, but it is still a very solid option because as a Resto Shaman in Mythic Plus content, you're going to be providing a lot of DPS regardless of the Vesper Totem nerf and things like that. You're still doing a lot. You still have an interrupt, you still have an AoE stun. A lot of things are still going well for Resto Shaman. It is still perceived to be an S tier Mythic Plus healer, while it is probably a little bit lower in raid. So my double legendaries, again, you can look at my kind of setup for Mechanicos. I think this is going to be pretty obvious. Elysian Dirge and things like that. The fact that I have Swirling Currents, and again I have Hammer of Genesis. Now, in terms of double legends for Restoration Shaman, I actually made a mistake here and I crafted the double Legos in terms of trying to get an early power spike. I didn't have a 4 set bonus. I wasn't sure when I'm going to get Andu and Helm piece because I don't raid with my Resto Shaman as much. So I ended up crafting Unity on a Helm slot and end up crafting Deep Tremor Stone, the Earth Elemental legendary, on a belt. This way I had high stat items with guaranteed sockets. And I was like, okay, this is gonna last me for a little bit, but this kind of setup requires 4 legendary crafting for your Resto Shaman for Mythic Plus and raids, and I feel most people do not need to do this, and it is somewhat of an exaggerated setup. But most people can get away with, and I feel this is going to be the most popular build. Let's get rid of the helm here. Most people will use the Unity belt that they crafted for raids. They're gonna use that, and then they're gonna craft the Deep Tremor Stone legendary on either feet or ring, depending on which pieces they have the lowest item level. Maybe they don't have like sockets on rings and stuff like that. Because I have something like a 278 feet, I probably would have crafted Deep Tremor Stone on a ring piece, and I probably could have gone away with this. Now this is a low item level legendary that I had from previous tiers, but this is probably a build that a lot of people might have used, and you can exchange the ring for feet depending on item level. And there's nothing wrong with this. Don't lose sleep over which piece to use, because believe me, the gain in stats is not worth worrying about it. So I would place, again, in Unity, Crit Verse, good for raid and Mythic Plus. And in terms of your legendary specific for Mythic Plus, and that's going to be your Deep Tremor Stone legendary most likely, you can go with Haste Verse, you can go with Crit Verse, it really depends. Again, I placed Haste on this, but it's really not really mandatory to do it. My stat priority, or my stat suggestion for Mythic Plus Resto Shamans right now would be that versatility is only gonna gain value. The higher keys that you're going to do, versatility is going to be stronger, because it provides you with damage reduction. It gives you damage and healing, but it also provides you with damage reduction. And this is why I said that the initial setup that I went with was not the best setup, because 4 set bonus is going to be a lot more required than I initially anticipated. Now, don't get me wrong, people are going to read the 4-set bonus and they're like, MadSkillz, what are you talking about? I don't want to cast hard cast chain heals in Mythic Plus. You don't have to. You don't have to change your gameplay whatsoever with the 4-set bonus. All you need to do is use your totems once in a while to get a free chain heal. That free chain heal is going to benefit from the 2-set bonus. It's also going to go into Cloud Burst and all of that. And all of a sudden, you're getting free healing. And you might say, but MadSkillz, I don't need healing when I'm doing these easy affixes, easy keys. Yes, I agree. You won't need the 4-set bonus for all of the keys and all the affixes out there. But I've been doing 25 Sanguine Deaths with Grievous recently, and the 4-set bonus would have been a substantial help during the boss fights and during some of the trash packs. And all of a sudden I felt that, hey, I really need this 4-set bonus in order to help me to achieve more healing, because Resto Shaman pure HPS output is actually on the lower end when you compare it to something like a Resto Druid Holy Priest. So there are going to be certain situations where, how do I say it without rambling on too much? This kind of Season 3 approach is DPS are glass cannons. All of a sudden, 4-sets and everything, again, we're not talking about tanks. Tanks with 4-set sometimes are unkillable, they have so much self-healing, is insane. But everyone else, they have a lot of damage with 4-set, but they have a lot less survivability because things like Shard of Kier is no longer here from Shard of Domination, which effectively increases your HPS by a substantial amount. You don't have these kind of defenses anymore, and all of a sudden, there is a lot of kind of mechanics that can almost one-shot you or requires you to provide a lot of healing. And as a healer, your job is to not only provide damage, but to also heal and prevent these, basically babysit your DPS, who are a lot more squishy now. So I do consider that 4-set is going to be used by a lot of Resto Shamans, and it is a lot better than what it reads on paper. Even though in Mythic Plus situations you don't want Mastery as any healer because it provides no damage. So this is why I feel that Helm Piece is very nice, because it gives you crit and verse, while your gloves are heavy Mastery. And I feel like in my perfect situation, I would like to complete a 4-set on my Resto Shaman without the gloves for Mythic Plus. So this is why I would... crafting Unity on Helm might not have been the best idea in hindsight for the longevity of my Resto Shaman, because I do want to get Anduin. I want to get Anduin Helm in the future. But this is something to consider based on your 4-sets. I don't want to ramble on too much. I do think the 4-set is going to be very, very much wanted. Do I think that Deep Tremor Stone Legendary that I crafted, do I like it? How do I use it? I get a lot of questions asked about this. You have to set up a macro. It's very, very important, because your Deep Tremor Stone, your Earth Elemental is going to pull aggro, or if it is going to pull aggro, it needs to be healed. In high-end content, if it pulls aggro, it might most likely will die. I am not a huge fan of Earth Elemental so far. I do acknowledge the fact that if you have a tank with 4-set bonus, if you have misdirections and things like that, and your Earth Elemental can live during a trash pack, you're absolutely the god of healer DPS out there. No one's gonna get even close to the amount of damage you can output as an Earth Elemental Resto Shaman with Vesper Totem on a large AoE trash pack. Absolutely insane amount of damage. If your Earth Elemental pulls aggro for 1 second in a high key, it's dead. All of a sudden 5-minute cooldown is over. And this can happen. This is why I feel that you need to be very, very careful. So making a macro, I use a click macro. I just set it up for number 5. Something like this, where it's going to make your Earth Elemental focus. So if I use my Earth Elemental right now, and I press it one more time, it's going to set a focus, and I can see the Earth Elemental HP. And I can use my click to heal Earth Elemental if it's pulling aggro, if it's getting some unnecessary attention that I don't want. If I click it again, well, you can remove the focus macro as well. So this is something that you should use, because it is very important to keep your Earth Elemental alive. If you do have focus interrupt macros, keep in mind this is going to prevent you from using it, because it's just going to focus on your Earth Elemental and it's going to try to interrupt your Earth Elemental, and you won't be able to do that. So this is actually going to complicate certain pulls, like on Spires, where you need to interrupt but you also want to deal damage. Something to consider. I don't want you to wipe a key because you had focus macro on your Earth Elemental and you had focus interrupt macro and it didn't work. Keep that in mind. You might have to do a bit of, switching about. Even though I'm not a huge fan of the Earth Elemental Legendary, I do have to say that if you play it properly, you'll provide an insane amount of damage. I think right now Resto Shaman is looking at something like 7k plus overall damage at the end of the dungeon if you use Earth Elemental properly, which is going to help you if you have a tank with 4 sets, because tanks get a huge power spike from 4 sets in terms of keeping aggro, in terms of damage and things like that. So Resto Shaman, insane amount of damage, utility, interrupt, still an S tier Mythic Plus healer, but I have or will be trying out different legendaries in terms of maybe like Elemental Equilibrium, maybe Skybreakers with Vent here, just because I'm not a huge fan of Earth Elemental Legendary. I think there could be other builds that might not be as good when played optimally, but could be interesting to try out. Like if you're doing a certain, there are plenty of dungeons out there where you feel like I cannot use Earth Elemental because if it pulls aggro it instantly dies. I'm just gonna use it on a boss fight, but then you have to hold on to your Earth Elemental for like 8 minutes because the boss is really far away depending on your route. And all of a sudden you might be questioning, would another legendary be better than Earth Elemental in this case? And this is why I'm gonna try out different builds. It's early in the tier, there's going to be different builds emerging, but right now Deep Tremor Stone, Kyrian, 4 Mythic Plus is just the way to go. And before I'm gonna finish off the video, I know I rambled on for a long time, try and get yourself the trinket from the sausage. The trinket from the sausage is absolutely insane. You need to spec into Elemental, so you can only get it as Elemental right now, but Resonant Reservoir is an insane trinket that's going to provide you, I don't know, I think on average it was doing something like 1 million of total DPS in a dungeon, which is like one of your top 3 DPS abilities that every healer is looking to get this trinket. This is the #1 DPS trinket that you want to get. This is going to provide so much damage. If you're a Resto Shaman with Earth Elemental Legendary, with Vesper Totem Kyrian build, and Resonant Reservoir, and you have, like, let's say a really optimal usage of Earth Elemental throughout a key, you're just without a doubt the top DPS healer by a decent margin if you can optimize everything. Now, it's easier said than done, but this legendary or this trinket, go and get it right now. Very, very much worth it. In terms of, again, I talked about my double legendaries, the fact that I made a little bit of a mistake. I think you should get your 4 set for Mythic Plus and raid situations, but this is my plan for Resto Shaman in terms of gearing, in terms of double legendaries, in terms of covenants. Let me know how you feel about this little like mini gearing guide. Let me know if you would like to see more videos like this for other healers, and I'll see you in my next video.